Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Caroline Kierazes, and I work in the Communications and Engagement team for the Pensions Dashboards programme. Welcome to everyone today, and thank you for joining us. We'll be recording this session and we'll publish it on our website shortly. If you would like to ask any questions, please pop them in the questions box, which you should be able to see on your screen, and we will aim to answer these in the Q&As at the end of the session. Here at the Pensions Dashboards programme, we launch an 8-week call for input on data on the 6th of July. In April, we published our thinking on data scope and data definitions. These working papers cover the breadth and depth of information dashboards should display. This thinking built on the government's stated intention that initial pensions dashboards should provide a simple find and view function, showing some consistent basic information for each pension found. Call for input will provide us with consumer and industry insight to help shape the data standards for initial pensions dashboards. Today, the 12th of August, with 3 weeks left to go, we thought it would be helpful to provide an update so that everyone watching is able to send us really helpful responses in our call for input. These will contribute to making pensions dashboards a reality as quickly as possible. Today, I'm joined by one of our programme steering members, Paddy Green, who is also Head of Money and Consumer Rights Policy at Which, the UK's largest independent consumer body. At the end of last year, Which surveyed their members about pensions dashboards, and we'll hear today what they said. We're also joined by our Head of Industry Liaison on the programme, Richard Smith. He's currently leading our data working group, which is thinking hard about these issues. Let's kick off. First off, I'm going to ask Paddy why the call for input on data is important from a consumer perspective.
Thanks, Caroline. But the whole idea of the dashboards is that they will allow individuals to see up-to-date information about all of their pensions in one place securely online. But for people to find dashboards really useful, they need to see the information on them that they find relevant and important. The programme has made proposals on what information could be shown on the dashboards, and our call for input is seeking views on these proposals, as well as asking for additional evidence to support and refine our thinking.
Great, thanks, Paddy. Richard, can you tell us the headline details about the call for input?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. So as you said, we published 2 working papers. One on scope, on the breadth of data to be shown on initial dashboards, and the other on definitions, which is sort of on the depth of data for each pension to be shown. And we're asking 4 or 5 questions on the proposals in each of those papers. The call for input runs to the end of August, as you said, so just a few more weeks. And full details are on our Pensions Dashboards programme website, where people can also submit their responses online.
Perfect. So Paddy, which questions that we're asking are really important to consumers, do you think?
Okay, so as part of our research, we asked a few hundred of our Which Connect panel members whether or not, first of all, they would use the dashboard and what would be important for them to see on the dashboard. So fortunately, there was really strong interest. More than 3/4 said that they would likely use the dashboard to find out about their pensions. Look at Which we've long been calling for the introductions of dashboards, and we think they have the potential to bring huge benefits by bringing all of the pensions together. And this is one of the key topics where we're asking for input. In due course, dashboards need to show all pensions. We know people want this, but in the interest of getting things going quickly, will it be acceptable to users to launch dashboards before all pension providers online, and therefore before every single pension is shown?
Yeah, I'll come in on that. Paddy's spot on. The existing user research from a number of sources we've got shows that people may have a low tolerance for an incomplete dashboard. That is one that doesn't show all their pensions. But if anyone watching this webinar has any additional evidence which might suggest that partial dashboards could be acceptable for individuals, albeit on a temporary basis, because we need to get this stuff done and done relatively soon, then we'd love to see that evidence. But there's a further challenge here. If we accept it's okay to launch dashboards before all pensions are shown, how can we communicate to the whole of the population, really, in a clear and simple way that they can understand which of their pensions they should and shouldn't expect to see on dashboards. We think that communication challenge could be quite tricky. So I'd say to everyone on this call, please do take a look at the specific questions we're asking on this important topic of scope in the call for input. And as I say, please do send us any relevant evidence you have. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. So that covers how many of my pensions are going to appear on dashboards. But Paddy, thinking about the data definitions working paper, in your previous Which research, what specific information did people say they wanted to see on pensions dashboards?
State pension. The thing most people said they wanted to see was the state pension. Nearly 3/4, 75% said they wanted to see that. And that makes sense because for many or for most, it's going to be their main source of retirement income. So on the programme, we're working very closely with DWP to ensure that state pension is going to be available to be shown on day one of the dashboard. So that's, yeah, first up, state pension.
And if I can build on what Paddy's saying there, Caroline. So the thing that's going to enable state pension, and in fact all pensions to be shown on initial dashboards, is the ability to digitally match people to all their pensions. And viewers can see this, the slide we've got here at the very top of our data pyramid, the match data. In our call for input, this matching of personal details is a critical topic we're exploring.
What's the very latest on that?
Well, what we're hearing is that many pension providers and schemes will want to match the pension entitlements they hold against the individual's national insurance number or NI number, and also their date of birth and potentially other items as well. What we're hearing is that pension providers have generally got quite high levels of confidence about the quality of NI numbers they hold. And again, I'd ask if anyone listening has any evidence on this particular point, not just that NI numbers are present, but crucially that the values are known to be accurate. Then we'd love to see that evidence, please. And the same goes for any other items of personal details that could be used for matching pension entitlements. Thanks.
Paddy, what else do you think users want to see?
Okay, so obviously we talked about state pension, but having found their pension information, what they want to be able to do is get in touch with pension providers and schemes for further information. So again, as part of our research, we enlisted 12 volunteers. Between them, they had approximately 40 different pensions, and we challenged them to track down and make sense of key bits of information. One of the challenges they faced was that pension company mergers, takeovers, and such like has added to confusion over time. So it needs to be really clear on dashboards which organisation each pension is with and how the individual can get in touch with them, because obviously, you know, individuals can also spot data issues themselves and they can address that if they can get in touch with folks.
Yeah, I'd echo that, Caroline. What we've said is that the initial dashboards are a simple find and view function of basic information. So it's very likely that individuals will want further information on some or all of their pensions. So in the call for input, views on what will be the best, most effective and efficient ways for individuals to get in touch with their pension organisations. Once again, please do send any relevant evidence you have on what works best in terms of different methods for customers and members to get in touch.
Okay, so the match data enables pension entitlements to be found, and the administrative data shows users how to get in touch for more details. But what actual information about each pension did your research show that people want to see, Paddy?
Yeah, so again, obviously alongside state pension, I think people most want to see is about 60% is the total estimate of their potential future retirement income. So in other words, they want to know how much they're going to have on in retirement, what they're going to have to live on later life after work. So consumers want things to be really simple. However, you know, building up gradually over the past several decades, policymakers and pensions in the UK pension industry, we've collectively devised a really complicated pensions world for consumers to navigate. But the core ask of individuals is roughly, you know, how much am I going to have to live on in retirement? So this gets to the heart of the dashboards challenge. You know, what people want is a simple view on what they will get from each of their pensions, yet many of those pensions are underpinned by layers and layers of complexity. So it's critical we strike balance here so the dashboards are really useful to individuals while acknowledging the challenges of the complexity from the provider side.
How do we strike that balance though? Richard, I expect many of the people watching this will be aware of the two broad types of pension entitlements. That is defined benefit, or DB, and defined contribution, or DC pensions. Can you tell us a bit more about the respective challenges for DB and DC?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with DC. Generally, these are newer pension arrangements, most prevalent amongst younger people, although people of all ages have DC pension pots. I myself have 3 DC pots, and I'm Generation X. In terms of the estimated retirement income, or ERI as we're calling it, DC pension providers and schemes are already doing good work in this space. Today, on the statements that they issue to all members every year, all DC schemes are currently required by statute to show an illustrated annual income that the DC pension pot could potentially provide at a retirement date in the future. So our starting position is that dashboards should merely bring together those income illustrations that were shown on the individual's latest annual statement. So taking me as an example, for my 3 DC pension pots, a dashboard would show me the 3 ERIs. It will be exactly the same figures I would have seen on my last 3 annual statements from my 3 pension providers.
That's simple enough for consumers. What do you think, Paddy?
On the face of it, yes, and it will be one way to get dashboards going, relatively quickly. There are several issues or challenges. The estimated income currently shown on paper statements is based on the assumption that folks are going to buy an annuity. But since Freedoms, fewer and fewer people are buying annuities. I think the FCA said last year 11% of DC pots were used to buy an annuity. So the vast majority of pots now have income, lump sum drawdown from them, over time. So that's a challenge.
So right now, sorry, Paddy, continue.
Okay, yeah. So look, so it is, it's a challenge. So, but that's not necessarily something to do with dashboards. It's an existing wider issue which we, as an industry, we're all, we're aware of and we're taking on. A further issue is, potential future incomes from pots, DC pots, can be illustrated on different bases. So Richard's example, he's got a bunch of DC income sorted. He sees on his 3 statements what he sees will be illustrated from different retirement ages, different assumptions within the allowed guidelines, to allow for growth between now and retirement. So it is a real issue. So our research volunteers struggled with inconsistencies in the way that information is presented in statements from different companies, and it's something that we think dashboards should really try and address.
So I guess right now, DC pension statements don't actually reflect how most people are using their DC pension pots.
Yeah, that's spot on, Caroline. And just reiterating Paddy's research, what do people actually want? What they want to see is a total ERI across all their pensions that they can understand simply. So even though in our call for input we've assumed that providers will supply that DC income from the latest annual statement, we've asked for comments on that assumption, and we're interested to hear all views and ideas from consumers and pension providers. And as before, we're asking for evidence. So if you're a DC provider or scheme, when you surveyed your customers or members and asked them what they want to see and what they can easily understand, what have they said to you? Please do send us those research findings and any other relevant evidence in this area.
Thanks, Richard. So that covers defined contribution estimated retirement incomes, DC ERIs, but what about defined benefit pensions?
Shall I? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So private sector, majority of DB pensions are now, they're deferred because many private sector schemes have closed to future accrual. So from each year from the date of accrual through to the date of retirement, legislation requires deferred pensions to be increased or revalued to keep them in line with inflation. Now, revaluation should be applied in respect of each year. There isn't the requirement for schemes to keep the members informed each year of the increase. So it is often the case that revaluation doesn't happen until an individual is just about to come to retirement, or they don't see it until they're just about to come to retirement. So that is a challenge. I'm
an example of that too. I've built my career on being a good case study for dashboards. So I've got a DB deferred pension. I've got a couple actually. One from an employer that I left in 1995. When I retire, probably in the early 2030s, as Paddy's saying, that DB pension needs to be revalued the whole of the intervening period of over 30 years. But in the meantime, I don't receive anything, any statements from that scheme. I only have the statement I received back in 95 when I left, showing me the amount of the pension per year at that date.
Yeah, I mean, this is within dashboards, the importance of striking that balance between simplicity for consumers and the complexity of the situation we find ourselves in. So Richard's own example, which is very, very common, would it be best for dashboards to show him the amount of his DB deferred in 95, or would a more up-to-date figure be more appropriate? Now, I have my opinion on this, but we want to hear the evidence, and you folks have, and see what you've heard from your customer base. So last year, the Institute of Faculty for Actuaries published a paper on dashboards. They said, DB deferred pension without any revaluation since the member deferred will significantly underestimate the income of retirement for the individual. So the actuaries have said schemes should apply dashboards with deferred pensions revalued within the last year, and that makes sense to me. But what do you folks think? What evidence do you have?
So that sounds good for the individual, up-to-date DC pensions on dashboards, giving a more realistic ERI. What do you think, Richard?
Well, yeah, as Paddy says, that's good for the individual, and that is indeed the assumption, the going-in assumption that we've included in the second of the working papers, the data definitions working paper. But what we're hearing is that it will be very costly and very time-consuming for pension schemes and administrators to program all their different revaluation calculations, which can often be very, very complicated. So once again, Caroline, we're asking for evidence. Again, for DB schemes listening today, when you surveyed your deferred members on what information they want to see to be kept up to date with their benefits, what have they said? What have they said they can understand? Please do share any insights you have with this.
Thanks, Richard. Paddy, what else do you think we need to consider?
I mean, the one I think is obvious is how much pension has been built up so far. So, we had our research. So state pension, estimated incomes, the next most popular piece of information was from about half of people was the statement on how much pension is built up so far. So the current value.
Okay. So Richard, will that be more straightforward than ERI?
Well, you think so, wouldn't you? And yes, I think in some ways. So for people who are actively building up DB pensions, which is about 6 million or so people in the public sector, but well under 1 million now in the private sector. Schemes, of course, already calculate the pension built up to date, and many already show this on annual statements as a per year income. In fact, many, but not all, and that's part of the challenge, many but not all schemes have chosen for that to be the extent of their annual statement content. That is what's built up to date, but not an estimate into the future. And many schemes, to help members think about the future, what they've done, they've developed sophisticated online modeler or calculators on their websites, enabling members to model different scheme-specific future options. The problem with that for me, with my 6 pensions, I've got to go to 6 scheme-specific modelers. But those modelers allow the individual to think about their future retirement income from that particular scheme.
Yeah, I think really important point Richard's highlighted. Initial dashboards will I think you said right at the very start, provide a simple find and view function showing people consistent basic information about all their pensions. Dashboards will not be tools for modelling future calculations. That's a job for providers and schemes.
Thanks, Patsy. That's all been really helpful to understand. Richard, DB pensions built up to date is straightforward, do you think?
Yeah. So DB active built up to date for 7 million or so actives, relatively straightforward, yes. But for DB deferred, again, we got the same problem we talked about earlier. So should dashboards show the pension as at leaving, or should it be revalued up to date? Same question.
Yeah, and what about the current value of DC pensions, Richard?
So on DC, showing the current value of a DC pension pot is, we're hearing, going to be relatively straightforward. However, showing a DC pot alongside state pension and any other DB pensions, which are expressed as per year or per month amounts, could be confusing for individuals. And we feel this needs to be further explored. Again, we're asking for evidence. So a number of folk listening may well be involved with schemes that already have DB and DC elements. So our question is, how have you chosen, or when you've researched with your members, how have you decided based on that research to display those existing elements alongside each other? And what have your members told you they want and can understand? And have you tested that they actually do understand the difference between DB incomes and DC pots? Please send us all the evidence you've got on that.
Thanks, Richard. Patsy, in your Which research, was there any other information that people said they wanted to see on pensions dashboards?
Yes, thanks, Karen. Look, one very important thing, again, came up with half the people we spoke to and they wanted to see, and it comes up in conversations, wider scope on pensions, is charges that people are paying on their DC pension pots. And this comes back to the core issue of trust in the market. It's all about trust for consumers. So dashboards will hopefully do is help try and build trust in pensions. And one way we can really contribute to that is being completely transparent about what people are paying.
I think that's right. So charge information for DC pensions in terms of pounds and pence, even though it's not something that DC schemes currently have to show on statements, although some do choose, some of mine do choose to do that. What we're asking in the call for input, thinking about pensions dashboards moving forward, is ideas for how that information could optionally be supplied. And we think it could be potentially be really, really helpful and powerful for consumers, particularly in relation to that trust issue that Paddy mentioned.
Thank you both. That's been really helpful. It's now time to move on to your questions. So some viewers have raised a few questions in advance, and we have some questions coming in on the question box. There's still time to ask your questions, so pop it in there if you would like to ask Richard and Paddy anything. So I will kick off with the first question. LV have adopted the Origo standards for our externally facing integrations with advisors. Have Origo been engaged to support the emerging data standards for the pensions dashboard? Probably one for you, Richard.
Yeah, I'll pick that. That question slightly getting onto the how, not the what. The real focus of this call for input is on what data, but what we find is, the what and the how are linked up. Just for any folk who are not aware that the progeny of the working papers, and you'll see when you read them, the HM Treasury and ABI ran a prototype project in 2016-17. Origo are involved in that, and the standards for that prototype were then picked up by the Pensions Administration Standards Association, PASA, who drew up some draft guidance on those standards, and that really the core of that material has found its way into the working papers that we've published this Easter. But I think what I would say is breadth is all important. This is in my sort of 30-year pensions career, it's the first time that the whole of the industry has been involved. So we're really asking for input from as many different stakeholders as possible. And I think a key thing to understand is these will be truly industry-wide standards, and we don't believe there are truly industry-wide standards currently that go all the way from state pension through public service pensions, trust-based DB, master trusts, individual personal pensions, buyouts, covering all pension entitlements. So they'd be truly industry-wide. Open standards. In fact, they've got to be open because they're going to be mandated by government and indeed maintained through government legislation. So that's a really key point to understand. But I think that's slightly down the track. The thing we're focusing on right now is content from both what's going to be usable for individuals and providable from schemes and providers.
Perfect. Thanks, Richard. I think I've got another one for you. Is it inevitable that NI number will form the key part of the member matching criteria? And is there any update on engagement with ICO regarding use of NI number as referred to in the data definitions working paper?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I think I probably avoid inevitable. What we're doing really as part of this engagement is testing that assumption, and really the question we're asking on matching is, what do organisations expect to match on? Now, the early doors information we're hearing is that, I think as I said earlier, most providers and schemes are expecting to match on a national insurance number, and they have relatively high levels of confidence, particularly for certain segments. So for DC schemes which use the tax relief basis set up on a relief at source method, and maybe for DB schemes where there's been a DB reconciliation exercise, there's perhaps a higher level of confidence about the quality of the national insurance numbers that are held. Any other evidence, particularly some statistics on that people have, please do send it in. There are other worries about NI numbers, about whether NI numbers coming from employers are always valid, and how those can be checked. What I would say on the second part of that question is our engagement to date has ratified or validated the position as published in the April 2019 government consultation, which is that there won't be a central verification of the self-asserted national insurance number that an individual comes to a dashboard with.
Thanks, Richard. Next question. How will an individual know that their dashboard is incomplete? Paddy, do you want to pick this one up?
Yes, yep, I will. Good question, thank you. That is a challenge. I mean, this relates, I think, to the communication challenge that Richard mentioned previously, is if dashboards, we're facing this challenge of how wide we're going to go at the start. So if dashboards are launched before the end of the stage introduction of compulsion, as we know that not everything is going to be there. So there's a communication issue there. There's another aspect, so if people have ideas or evidence about how to effectively communicate information to your customers, please do send that in to us. And then I think I said earlier on is that I think the second part of things, data we wanted consumers to see, was the ability to get in touch and contact the pension providers. Because what happens is when you do provide consumers with information, it triggers thoughts, and they will start to engage with it. So that's that point of, we know there's a huge amount of data, and when you hold so much data, it is inevitable there are going to be inaccuracies within it. But by bringing all this data together and providing consumers with the opportunity to get in touch, it will trigger and help the process of making sure that we can get that information as complete as possible.
Shall I just build something? I'd echo what Paddy was saying there. Incomplete dashboard. So as I said, the evidence we have so far, and if others have more, please let us know, is that incomplete dashboard might be a suboptimal user experience. I want to see my pensions.
Yeah.
The other side of that coin is, okay, so we probably don't launch dashboards then until quite near the end of the rollout of compulsion. But that means we need to get on with it, and we need to get to the end of compulsion quicker, if that makes sense. So there's a trade-off here about the quality of user experience and how quickly we can get to the end of the staged introduction of compulsion.
Absolutely.
Thank you both. Next question. For DB schemes, it has been stated that DB arrangements are required to project future service rather than up to a current date on benefit statements, even though it is not a regulatory requirement to do this. Our members are accustomed to seeing benefits accrued up to a current date, and a statement based on projected service might inflate their benefit expectations were they to leave and be inconsistent with the benefit statements they have been provided with to date. Is it possible to continue providing benefit statements as we do now and allow the member to make their own projections?
Yeah, so shall I come on this, and maybe Paddy can add to that? So this comes back to the thing. So many schemes have decided we've got such a complex retirement basis, we're just going to show what's built up to date. And I think that question is saying that's their position. And many schemes have invested to get scheme retirement modelers to do the future calculations or a range of calculations. However, that's not consistent. Many schemes do still put an estimated retirement income based on assumed future service as well. So I think what I said, the big learning for me doing this is we've got a very wide divergence of what's currently do, and you sort of almost have to stop thinking about one scheme. When I talk with pensions folk, they're very clear on what we do for our scheme or what we do for our customers. Yeah. But remember, for me, I'm a customer of 6 schemes and providers who all do different things. And I think, Paddy, you said your research found that was a real problem for your volunteers.
Yeah, and yes, I think so. Just on that research point, I mean, the point is people, we think about pensions all the time, but consumers and individuals don't. They're thinking about a vast amount of things in their life to process their own job and all this sort of stuff. So we do have that. We have a snapshot to engage with them, and we need to grab them and make it as easy for them as possible when we have them for that moment. So what did happen is I understand people, different organizations present their data in different ways, but what consumers are telling us is it is very difficult and it is very time consuming to go, say, well, I'm looking at here, and this pension is based on the calculations taking me off here, and this is over here. Some are giving me future projections and some aren't, and it's a huge challenge for them. So now we can sort of have a debate. It would be brilliant if consumers spent more time thinking about pensions and engaging with pensions, but they're not going to do it. So I think we need to think about how we as an industry can shape how we present things to them to make it as simple for them. Does that go some way to addressing the issue, do you think, Richard?
I think so. I think I've said in a couple of these webinars now, I'm personally finding almost having to stop thinking like a pensions person and start thinking like a consumer, and not just and recognizing, yes, if I'm a scheme, I might be administering one pension, but that member, if they're deferred, probably does have other pensions, and they are thinking holistically about all their pensions, and getting some comparability is going to be key, but we're alive to the challenge of getting that comparability, hence this call for input and seeking widely as possible all the best ideas and evidence on that.
Just on that, look, appreciate, sometimes which you think which are banging on about making things overly simple, all this stuff. I appreciate it is complex. It is complex. So that's why this is about, give us the information, give us everything you've got about consumer engagement, customer engagement, individuals, so that the dashboard can be as effective as possible. Because the risk we have is that we can design something on the data and the systems we have in place right now, and people don't use it and people don't engage it, and that would not be optimal.
No. All right, we've got time for a few more questions. So next one, I think this is for Paddy. Was there any indication in the research that there was an interest in seeing information on underlying assets in individual pensions?
There was, yes. I cannot off the top of my head remember what the data is, but there was. I think we asked for 10 types of data. It came in at about 6 or 7. I will see. Hang on, I'm sure I can get this up. It was just over a quarter on making investment decisions. So there was an interest. It was a sizable interest, but it wasn't one of the primary factors, but it was there, yes.
Again, I think I see this topic partly in the area of charges, and we've put something in the data definitions working paper about this. Absolutely, there is intelligence that folk are interested in. I think it varies by age group. I think about my eldest daughter, who's a millennial, and when they understand that their pension's invested, because many folk don't really know what happens to the money. Oh, it's invested somewhere. Well,
Mm.
blimey, I want that to be in renewables. I don't want to be in oil and gas. So I think there will be a growing need for this. But if folk have evidence on that, please send it in. So what we've said in the call for input is ideas for passing that information to dashboards once we've got initial dashboards up and running. Remember, we've got a hill to climb to get initial dashboards going on a simple find and view service of basic information. Let's get to that base camp, and then let's build from there.
Thank you both. Right, let's pick another question. Is there any views on the need to include pensions in payment on the dashboard, given the fact many people may take pensions at different stages?
So I'll start, shall I, and see what. So what we've said in the document is the working assumption is they're not in scope. The April 2019 government consultation was silent on this matter, but we've been explicit in saying that's the working assumption. It adds a great deal of data complexity because a pension that has started to being paid or drawn down is in many ways a different animal in terms of data requirements. So that every layer of complexity we add to this, we heighten that first step of getting going with a simple find and view function. So the going in assumption is they're out, but we've asked, we're interested if folk have got views on that. A Swedish experience I'll throw in, they don't show pensions in payment. So if you had 3 pensions, say, not in payment, then you put one into payment, suddenly it disappears off the dashboard. And they found that wasn't a very good user experience. So we're alive to the fact that by saying they're not in, we are potentially having a detrimental effect on the impact. I'm sure Paddy will have something to add to that.
Well, I think you covered most of the key bases there. I think it's just make sure that I mentioned, I think a moment ago, we do have issues around communication. So whichever way we end up going, it's going to be what the research you folks are holding, what it's telling you, what communication methods are needed to express what is going on to customers. One of the things I think comes out is we know that people aren't as engaged in pensions as we like. So we're building a system to get people to be aware of what they're saving. To then add in that complexity is a challenge for consumers to start addressing and getting their head around all the figures and the maths they have to do. However, if people have that evidence to say to disprove any statement I've just made in the last 20 seconds, send it to us. Thank you.
Paddy just reminded me there, I think part of the logic and evidence that we've seen is that if you've already got some money coming in, you're already a degree of engagement is already in play there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Final question. Will the dashboard provide customers with other important information, such as guarantees that may be present in their DC pot?
I'll let you go first, Paddy.
Will it? I think I'm going to come in my role as Head of Money and Consumer Rights, in order to build trust in markets, consumers must have guarantees of certain structure and certain remit in order to fully engage with faith and with confidence in markets. They need to have a way to have redress when things go wrong. There needs to be methods that need to be in place, and these are discussions that we've at the program, at the steering group meetings. These are discussions we know we're going to have. We're going to be having them short term. But for me, for a consumer, we do know that in a complex scenario, we do have to have protections in place for consumers in order to make it work. So for me, there needs to be a guarantee in there at some point. Yeah, Richard.
Viewers may be detecting a theme here. So the consumer view is yes, we need to indicate. Individuals need to know if there are special features or guarantees attached to their entitlements. I'm thinking about, particularly if they're old DC pots with maybe guaranteed annuity rates, those can be incredibly valuable, and folk need to understand that. But I'll just add a little bit. Folk may have read that we've assembled a working group to try and formulate thinking here, not to settle ideas, but to formulate.
Yeah,
ideas.
sorry. Yeah.
And
yeah, go on.
I was going to say, the last meeting we had, we listed some, what we, off the top of our heads, what we felt the range of special features could be. A number of the participants said, well, I could triple that list. So the question is coming to simplicity, and as Paddy has said, consumers need simplicity. We need to find a way to summarize the way in which, when individuals see a number, what is attaching to that number in terms of special features or guarantees. And I suppose one thing I would say is that's partly how stuff is displayed. So at the same time, or slightly after, when we develop the data standards, we also will be developing front-end design standards, and that will absolutely play in that space to say, if we've got information coming through to say this is a number but there's a special feature, how do we need to indicate that when we show it on a dashboard?
Yeah. Just to clarify anything there, is that the guarantee or protections I'm in place is about the the accuracy of information in terms of digital format. So we're looking, there are issues, and I know it's different on open banking or other digital forums. People have an idea of what they are engaging with. So that's where I'm going to, because obviously I know we're going through legislation is going through at the moment, and the long-term functionality of the dashboard has been obviously discussed in depth. So we'll have to see where we end up in the long-term future.
Thank you both. That's been really helpful. And also thank you to everybody that sent in their questions. If we didn't get a chance to answer them, we do have your details, so we'll come back to you separately afterwards. Thank you very much to everyone that has joined us today. I just want to ask both Paddy and Richard if they've got any sort of closing comments at all. Paddy, do you want to go first?
Look, I just wanted to say it's, well, thank you for allowing Which to participate in this, and I just want to get as much evidence in for us, or for the program to digest, so we can understand that how consumers engage with their pensions. We want to make sure that consumers are going to be at the forefront, so that we have a product that they can use. So we want to make sure that they'll, any information you have on what your customers see as relevant, what is useful, how they engage with it, so that we end up, as I say, with that product that they will use efficiently and effectively.
Thanks, Paddy. How about you, Richard?
Yeah, thanks for me too. Just a final ask for everyone watching, please do go to our website, the Pensions Dashboards Programme, have a look at the call for input questions that we're asking on data. Please do, if you have time in the next couple of weeks, up to the August bank holiday, do think hard about these really challenging issues and how to strike this balance between simplicity and complexity. Send us your call for input responses, supported by as much evidence as possible, as Paddy has said, by the end of August. Thank you.
Thanks very much to both of you, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye now. Bye.